Let's rock and roll, folks. We got things we need to do by Jingle. So, well, we welcome back an old face, a young old face. Martha, excuse me, and her husband Matt from Milwaukee. Lots of M's there. Okay, so good to have them. Couple of things before we get going. If you don't have today's papers, don't worry about it. I'm just going to read the last three numbers on page 84. I'm just going to read them, talk about it just very briefly, and then we have new papers for chapter 13. Okay, so don't worry about not having the last three numbers. It's not that essential. Second, of course, is your questions. We have one that we need to answer, and then there's one that I got this week because today is Flag Day. But your questions come first always, and so if you have something you want to yak about right away, now is the time to ask. Yes, sir. Martin Luther.
His last name is Luder.
Luder, L-U-D-E-R, was his original.
What does that mean, George? Does that mean wood or?
I'm not sure. German is not my.
What happened? How did you change it?
Well, we're not sure that he changed it. It might have been his father that changed it. His father started out very, very poor and became what we would call upper middle class, owned a mine. He was a miner, but then he bought or owned a mine. And there is some thought that maybe his father actually changed his name when he moved up in status.
I might have changed it too. That's what the actual translation means.
Oh yeah, might be bitch in German.
I would change it too.
Luder, I don't know. I don't know anything about German, so don't ask me that. I don't know. But yeah.
Germans would name their church after.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, probably not. But you know, if it was something along those lines, it didn't make sense if he got up and began to hang around with the mayor and people like that in a little upper society. You could think, oh, I'll change my name to something a little more country, a little bit more nice, whatever. So
Not be too by when they speak, when they're saying something.
well, yeah, it could be also High German, Low German kind of thing too. That it could be something like that. But like I say, I am the last person to ask anything about German. I don't know anything about German, never took any German. My dad took German in college and he knew a little bit, but he never passed on what he knew to me. So.
But a lot of them didn't have last names, like Linnaeus,
Right.
the one who did the scientific.
Right.
He just picked that up because he goes,
And people changed their names in those days all the time. All the time. And you were maybe, Ralph from Avignon.
Right.
And so your name became Ralph Avignon. And yeah, and Olson's and the Max, McClary and McLean and those son of, and so yeah, it took a while. I really think that it wasn't really until the 1700s, maybe 100 years after Luther, that last names really got to be kind of permanent, so. So anyway, we had a question on infant baptism, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I will say that yes, there was a push to get rid of infant baptism by the reformers on the Swiss side, French, Swiss, somewhat Italian maybe, Southern German, Austrian branch of the Reformation, because Calvin, and not just Calvin, but Zwingli and others who were sympathetic to some of Calvin's ideas, they started out agreeing with Luther 100%. Indulgences were wrong, purgatory was wrong, worshiping saints, Mary, so that was all wrong. They started out that way, but as time progressed, they diverged from Luther because they didn't think Luther was doing enough to change. His changes, the Reformation, the Lutheran Reformation, is a conservative Reformation, okay? And so Luther sought to conserve that which was good, okay? To conserve the good. And so, for example, he didn't have a problem with organs in church, in music, okay, or pianos, although pianos were not really around yet, harpsichords were. But he didn't have a problem with musical instruments. He didn't have a problem with statues. A statue of Joseph, a statue of Mary, a statue of Jesus, statue of whatever. He didn't have a problem with those kinds of things. He didn't have a problem with the liturgy. He didn't have a problem with the regalia, wearing a cassock and surplice, or wearing a chasuble, or wearing a stole, or any of those things. He didn't have a problem with that. He conserved those things because he saw them as having a good purpose, or even if not having a good purpose, they weren't unbiblical or anti-gospel, all right? The other side of the Reformation, the Reformed side of the Reformation, was and is still a radical Reformation. That is, get rid of everything that even smacks a little bit Roman. So chasubles, stoles, crucifixes, statues, liturgy, organs, stained glass windows, anything like that, get rid of it. And some of the radicals became even more radical. You couldn't have any music at all that wasn't played by a harp like David played. If it wasn't in the Bible, you couldn't do it. If you sang a song, hymns that were made up hymns, beautiful Savior, whatever, wrong. All you could do if you wanted to sing, you had to sing to a harp and maybe a tambourine, because that was in the Bible, and you had to sing only the Psalms. So you took a psalm and you put that to music. That's the only thing you could do. That's why some religions, some church denominations are referred to as psalm singers. Okay? There are others who did not agree with kneeling at all. There were others who said you had to kneel. You had to pray kneeling. They are called kneelers. All right? And so on and so forth. So once the revolution split along these lines of conservative and radical, the radicals just became, in many ways, more and more and more and more and more radical, and more division, more division, more division, more division. So then you had the Calvinists and the Arminians. Calvinists believed that people are predestined to heaven and hell, period. Okay? No, you have no choice in the matter. You have no say in the matter. You're either going to heaven or hell from the moment you're conceived, and you don't know which, and you just have to hope you got the right one. That's Calvinism, all right? Arminius didn't like that, Jacob Arminius, and Arminius said, no, we have free will, and we choose. We decide for ourselves. Do we want to believe in God or not? Do we want to believe in Jesus or not? Do we want to be a Christian or not? Okay, and that has become the main Christian belief. The Southern Baptists just had their convention in Florida this past week, the largest Protestant denomination in the world, rivaling in many ways the Roman Church in population. Okay, many times greater than any other Protestant denomination. They are Arminian, not Armenian, but Arminian, following Jacob Arminius. Easy way to remember: decision theology. That's the Baptist version. and many other denominations go along with that, okay? So that is the radical Reformation. Now, I just want to explain real quick, and then we'll go on, the reason why. Why did people dump everything, including infant baptism, and get rid of it? Because, very simply, they looked at the Roman world, Roman church world. They looked at the world of the Roman church, and they said, wow, it seemed to them, the vast majority of people are living really nasty, rotten, stinking lives. They're not living Christian lives at all. Ergo, therefore, they are not Christian. So, therefore, ergo, their baptism was no good. Their first communion was no good. Communion and Lord's Supper doesn't do anything for you. Their confirmation was no good. Might as well not even do it anymore. Okay? The liturgy is no good. People are just right? Or they memorize it and they say the words, right? Like saying the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, right? Or Apostles' Creed, or okay? So they looked at the Christian world at that time, and from the kings all the way down, there was only one church, Roman church, that was it, right? All the kings belonged to the Roman church, all the popes, were head of the Roman church, all the bishops, all the archbishops, and you had popes who were dying of syphilis. You had popes who were running the Vatican like a whorehouse. You had popes who were assassinating other people, their rivals, and were themselves sometimes assassinated. Okay, you had some really nasty, nasty, nasty people. You had a pope who was a Satanist. Okay, that's fact of history, right? So you had the church was so corrupt. It was just so full of corruption. Tons of nuns are getting pregnant. Many priests had mistresses and acquired property and had illegitimate children. Popes had illegitimate children. They were greedy. They were gluttonous. Some popes were incredibly obese. Some of the bishops were too, and archbishops. Okay, so they looked out in the world and they said, "This ain't working. This stuff doesn't do any good. It's just you're just going through the motions. You're saying a bunch of words and it doesn't mean anything. So let's get rid of it all." Okay? When you read Luther at the same time, he says pretty much the same thing. He says, you people are not putting any of yourself into this worship. Okay? You're not learning anything. You're not practicing it. Now, he said, the problem isn't the rituals. The problem isn't the regalia. The problem isn't stoles and crucifixes. The problem is not holy water and holy oil. And the problem is not infant baptism and Lord's Supper. That's not where the problem is. The problem is in here. The problem is up here. That's where the problem is. You people are not living according to Christ. And so he conserved what he saw as good, or at least what was not unbiblical, and said, what you got to change is you got to change your mind. You got to change your attitude. You got to change the way you live. And he fought that his whole life. And finally, on his deathbed, he confessed. He said, "I've done no good at all." And he was very literally sorry that he even started the Reformation. Because here I have presented the true gospel. I've gotten rid of work righteousness. I've gotten rid of indulgences in purgatory and whatever. I've gotten rid of all of this stuff and all the fear of the Roman church and Jesus as an angry judge. I've done all this. I've worked my butt off for 30 years, and what have I got? I look around and they're still being pigs. And the last words on his lips were, "We are all nothing but beggars. We're just worthless." He was very dejected, depressed, and cynical when he died. Very. And he saw his work as being worthless, right? Because the reaction of the people was, okay. There were some, like his benefactor, Frederick the Wise, and there were other guys like that in the politics, who said, well, we like this, that we don't have to live in purgatory for 1 billion years and pay off our own sins. And we like this, that we don't have to earn our salvation. And we like, and so there were plenty of people, all right, but it seemed to Luther that the vast majority just didn't give a rat's rear end. And they were just going to whichever side could cross their palm with silver, and whichever side could make them more prosperous and give them more pleasure and happiness in life. And that's why he was cynical and dejected. We see the same thing today. I go to a district convention, and the pastors are way more concerned about their 401ks, and they're way concerned about the pleasure and having a good time and a party, and pleasing their wives and children, than they are about debating theological things. And Luther is an afterthought. It's like, he's a nice guy, but let's talk about what's important. Let's talk about my retirement plan. Let's do that. Let's talk about the pension program. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about putting missions where there are rich people that can support our churches. And
Sounds kind of wrong, doesn't it?
yeah. So I skipped the last day because I was fed up to here with it. But I as I get older and now 45, 46 years in the ministry, I'm more and more like Luther every day. More and more like Luther every day. And I see the vast majority of people in our church body, for sure, and among my peers, my pastor peers, just not giving a rat's rear end about the confessions anymore. It's just not important to them. So I understand why Calvin and Zwingli and those guys, I understand when they looked out at the world and they just said, this ritual and liturgy and pomp and ceremony, and it's just not working. I give you a great example. This was it was so ironic. It was funny in a way, but it was kind of sad. So we have a new district president, got elected 2 years ago, got reelected, of course, this time, because incumbents in Wisconsin always get reelected. That's in the Senate anyway. And it's just 99.99%. Anyway, and he was the preacher for our opening service. And some of our churches are trying to kind of bring back some ritual and thing that used to be done many, many years ago, to kind of show that, yeah, we really do care about history and tradition and whatever. I'm not sure that all of them make a whole lot of sense, but one that they're bringing back, or some are bringing back anyway, is a processional. And so, and when you have a processional in the church, or Lutheran church, Catholic church, whatever, you have to have a processional cross, okay? And it's usually referred to as a crucifer. The guy who carries it is a crucifer because he carries a crucifix. And it's usually a crucifix. It's not usually a bare cross or a blank cross. Anyway, and so there was this big explanation in the bulletin for, of course, the ones who were not from Phoenix and not from that congregation, which was a lot of people. There was probably 500 people in the building. And there were a lot of people that weren't from that congregation, and so had never seen one of these before in a Lutheran church. So there was a big explanation, and the explanation was, and it's what it said. It said, so as we all rise, and as the crucifer enters the building carrying the cross, the processional cross, and you're supposed to turn, like with the bride, right? You're supposed to turn as the bride goes down the aisle, okay? So as the crucifer goes down the aisle, everybody's supposed to turn to keep their eyes focused on the cross, right? okay? And then you have the stand that's right smack in the middle of the altar area, the chancel, okay, the stand, and the crucifixion puts the cross in that stand, right? And so they're all our focus of the whole service. And it says right there, it says, the focus of the entire service is right there at the cross. And you just keep looking at that cross the whole time, look at that cross. So the preacher, the district president, gets up for his sermon, and he has a little clicker in his hand, and he pushes the clicker, and a big screen comes down right in front of the cross and covers it up so that he can do his PowerPoint sermon.
There's nothing necessarily wrong.
No, but the point is, you make this big deal about focus on the cross, focus on the cross, focus on the cross, and then the guy covers it up. Hello?
How many times in scripture does it tell us that?
We'll focus on the cross?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, tons, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, look at that. I said, couldn't you have put the stand in front of where the screen would be? Because there was plenty of room in front of the screen. He could have put the, and I'm just thinking to myself, what an idiot. This guy is our leader? You know, I was just dumbfounded. I just, you know, good grief.
So how's your 401k doing?
The synod one, not so hot. My own personal one, just fine. All right. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about idols now. So anyway, that's why infant baptism went bye-bye in the Baptist church. So idols. I got this question, can the U.S. flag, it was a very particular question, can the U.S. flag be an idol? Okay, because today is Flags Day. And I answered the person and I said, sure. I mean, what's the, you think about the explanation of the first commandment, right? Fear, love, and God, that, you know, right? Trust in above all things, right? Fear, love, trust in God above all things. Well, if the flag or the country or your job or your wife or your husband or your kids or anything is above God, isn't that an idol? Yeah, it is. It is an idol. So anything can be an idol. Your car can be an idol. Okay, your retirement account can be an idol. Okay, anything can be an idol, right? If you put it above God or you put it even equal with God, well, you know, on the same level. All right. In our country, it is certainly possible, especially the last few years. I would say last maybe 20 years or so, because the divide, okay, between the patriots and the so-called not patriots, or the patriots and the progressives, or, you know, whatever, the Democrat socialists, or whatever you want to call them, like in New York and Seattle and whatever, you know, and in some people's minds, Christianity, and especially conservative Christianity, is equal to conservative politics. All right, and that means, you know, all hail the flag, and, you know, and I know there are churches today, I'm sure there are churches today in this town that will probably sing, you know, you're a grand old flag, you're a high flying flag, in their church service, okay? Or to songs like that, all right? And I'm sure there'll be a processional in some with the flag, okay? Now, to me, that's wrong. I tell you something, when I got here, how many of you are here when I got here? Nobody. Well, Jesse. He was pretty young. And Christy, I think, was here. But when I got here 30 years ago, all right, 28 and a half, whatever. Anyway, when I got here, I walked into the chapel for the first time. It struck me that they had the American flag in the chancel area, where we kind of have nowadays the same spot we have where the Christ candle during the Sundays after resurrection, okay? It was right on that side. And then where we have the baptismal font, there was the so-called Christian flag, okay? And I was, that week was the week of my installation. So I got here probably on a Wednesday, and my installation was on Sunday. I was installed Sunday afternoon, after everybody left, we had our nice little lunch and everything. It was like 5, 6 o'clock, 4 or 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever. I came over here, all was quiet, whatever. And I went up in the chancel and I picked up the American flag and I took it and I put it where it is now. And I took the Christian flag and I put it where it is now. Okay, so I moved them way off to the side. And the first Sunday, I remember, I can't think of his name. I could see him, but I can't think of his name. He was an artillery officer during Second World War. He had retired as a colonel. What was his name? I don't know. You remember that guy? I can't remember his name. Anyway, he always sat kind of up in front. And he was a rascal. Oh, he argued with me about everything, time of day. And he argued with me the first Sunday. He is coming out that first Sunday. And after this was before he made the comment about the flag. But he said, those shoes could use a little bit of a shine there, Reverend. And you don't wear whatever color pants I had with black shoes. That just looks bad. And there wasn't much of a crease in those pants either. Come on, get with it. And then after the last person was done and he was still standing there and I said, did you need something else? And he said, yeah. He said, who moved the flags? And I said, I did. I said, the flags don't belong in the chancel area. Who says? And I said, I say. I am the pastor here and I say. We show plenty of deference. They're there. They're in the front. What I would have done had I thought, well, but this is not, if this wasn't a military town, what I would have done is take them and put them in here somewhere. Like cross up there, somewhere and get them totally out of the worship area entirely. But I didn't do that. I was nice. Okay? They don't belong. Patriotism's fine, America's fine, flag is fine, okay, that's great, that's wonderful, but they don't belong in church. Sorry, they just don't. So they're way off to the side. I don't see them most of the time. I don't pay any attention to them. Anybody else, so.
Christ perceives nations.
Yeah, really, he does. So, anyway, okay, let me read this real quick and then we'll get to the new chapter. And this is about this first beast, okay? So the first beast is civil government. Okay? The first beast is civil government. And this beast sometimes wants to be worshipped like an idol. It does. Okay? Yeah, right. So the comfort for believers here is that we are assured that the gates of hell should not prevail against us. God will always find a way to preserve at least a remnant of his church against all the campaigns of the devil, including those like in the Roman Empire, the great persecutions and things like that, okay? Since Satan cannot and will never be able to destroy the church as a whole, he goes after its children, that is, individual believers. His plan and hope is to separate them from the church and weaken them, make them easy prey for a false gospel so they might lose their saving faith and put their souls in his hellish hands. So, the devil knows that the church is never going to disappear. That is, the church of all believers. The invisible church. That's never going to disappear. He knows they're always going to be believers. So he cannot destroy the church as a whole, as an organization or as a group. So he goes after individual, and as I've said many times in this class and other classes too, when you join the church or when you convert or when you come over to Christianity, whatever, you have a big target on your back. And if you think your life is going to be peaches and cream after that, you're totally wrong in most cases. Does happen once in a while, but in 99% of the cases, you come over, or God brings you over, I should say. God brings you over to his side, the devil's going to come after you. He has no reason to come after you when you're a pagan, unbeliever. What's the point? I mean, he might, just because he likes to make people miserable, but he's got there's no reason to do that. There's a lot of reason to do that once you're on Jesus' side. Then he's got big reason to come after you. Okay? Number 20, note that believers are referred here as those who keep the commandments of God and have or possess the testimony of Jesus. Those who have the testimony of Jesus have the gospel. They truly possess it, and it possesses them. They live by Christ's gospel, which is their sole motivation for obeying God's will. They are not saved by keeping the commandments. They keep the commandments because they are saved. Okay? So, The first beast is not able to do us any real damage, spiritual damage, eternal damage, okay? That's the lesson of that chapter, chapter 12. Now we go on to another beast. And this beast too, though there's all kinds of controversy and debate in many churches about this and among many theologians, the fact of the matter is this particular beast is clear as crystal also. There should be no debate whatsoever on this one. All right. All right. So, let us begin, first of all, by reading a little bit. This is another vision. Okay, remember we're in the era, we're in the part of the vision where we have visions. So this is a vision within a vision. Okay, I know that sounds confusing, but don't let it bother you. So this is going on. So the first beast is come from this earth, and he stands upon the earth. And the first beast, again, is civil government. Not just the Roman Empire, not just communism, but any and every civil government that can be used as a tool for Satan. Even democracy, republic, whatever, can be used by Satan as a tool for his purposes. All right, so now we're moving on to a different beast. Okay, chapter 13, let's read the first 6 verses. And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. That's the devil. Okay, so the devil stood on the sand of the seashore, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns, 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. Okay, so if you picture this, okay, this beast coming up, he's got 10 horns and 7 heads. Now, I don't know, the Greek is not clear enough here for me to tell you whether there's 10 horns on each of the 7 heads or 10 horns divided among the 7 heads. It really doesn't matter. All we know is there are 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, so that's what we see. And the horns, and each of the horns had 10 crowns, diadems. Remember, diadems are different than the other Greek word for a crown, Stephanos. Stephanos is a kind of a humble type of crown. It means victory, but it's also very humble. It's the kind. Stephanos is the crown that you got in the Olympics. It's just leaves. It's not worth anything. It doesn't have any value, intrinsic value. Okay, a diadem, diademos in Greek, is a fancy crown. It's the crown that the Persians king began to wear, and it's the same word that's used for the crown that the Pope wears when he wears the papal crown. That's a diadem. That's not a Stephanos. That's a diadem. Okay, so one that looks kind of like a beehive. Have you ever seen that? Okay. So on each of the horns were 10 diadems, and on the heads, again, those heads that were named, the 7 heads, each of the heads had a blasphemous name. The word here is plural. Okay, so again, we're not sure, are there 10 or 7 or whatever many blasphemous names on each head, or are there blasphemous names on all the heads together, or what? Does each head have 2 or 3, or does each head have so many? We don't know. All we know is that we have the horns, the heads, the names, and the diadems. Those are the things that we're going to concentrate on when we go to interpret the vision. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet like those of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and throne and great authority. Okay, so remember those animals because they'll come in handy later on in our interpretation. And I saw one of the heads as if it had been slain. Now that word slain, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but I just clue you in now, that word slain, a better translation from the Greek would be slaughtered. Okay, or maybe even better, butchered. Butchered. In other words, some translations will even say slain or slaughtered to death. So not just, a knife through the heart, but hacked to pieces and killed, dead. Dead for all intents and purposes. You look at, there's no way that person's coming back. You can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Okay, that guy's really dead. Wow, I mean, he's really dead. Okay, and but the fatal wound was healed. So this entity was just deader than a doornail, and came back, and was revived. Wow. Okay. And the whole earth was amazed. Everybody, wow, look at that! Isn't that amazing? And the whole earth followed him. Oh yeah. Hey, you're great. You're fantastic. You're something else. And they worshiped the dragon. They worshiped the devil because he gave his authority to the beast. Thank you, devil, for giving such power and great influence to this beast. Thank you so much. And they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Oh, who's able to win? Who's going to beat this guy? This guy is top dog. This guy is the best thing since sliced bread. This guy is tougher than nails, and he's got the biggest army, and he's got the most power, and you're never going to get rid of this guy. This guy is here for good." Okay? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, killed to death? Raised again? Great power? Followed by the world? Ah, Jesus! No, sorry. You're going to be surprised, or maybe not. And there was given to him a mouth speaking. Notice this. Notice who has this. This critter, okay, that was wounded and came back, all right? What does he do? He speaks arrogant words and blasphemies. Can't be Jesus. So there goes that interpretation out the window, okay? And authority to act for 42 months was given to him. 42 months again, folks, 3.5 years means everybody. Come on. The entire New Testament period of time, no big mystery here. Really easy peasy, okay? The entire New Testament period of time, 42 months, 300 whatever, many days, 900 something, whatever it was, and 3.5 years, same thing. No matter what it says, when you see that, you know. The entire, from Pentecost to Judgment Day, the whole tamale, however long that is, whether it's 1,000 years or 10,000 years or 15,000 years from now, whatever. And he opened his mouth and blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. What is the God's tabernacle? Again, God's tabernacle is the Holy Christian Church, the communion of saints, the church of all believers, everybody whose names are written in the book of life. Okay? All right. So that's a vision and a half, ain't it? Wow. And man, you can go out to the Christian bookstore and you can find all kinds of books, and all kinds of books will tell you all kinds of amazing things. And this guy, this beast is Stalin, and that head is Hitler, and that other head is Mao Zedong, and this is that, and whatever. And yeah, and somebody asked me today about the Euphrates River drying up, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And so on and so forth, and all this is happening around, and look, and Jesus is coming back tomorrow. Yeah. It's going to come back on Trump's birthday because Trump is the Antichrist. Yeah. That's the ticket. Yeah. And so on and so forth, right? Don't buy any of that nonsense, people. Again, this entire New Testament period of time, it can happen any minute. Could be 5 seconds from now, but it also could be 500 years from now. Come on. We're supposed to... Huh? What?
Political authority in general, so at the time, maybe Caesar.
Well, this beast is different. He uses political authority, but he's different. He's a different kind of authority. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, let's look at the notes. It's going to take us a while to cover just these 6 verses. I think it's going to make us take 2 or 3 pages at least. All right, yeah, maybe 4 pages. Okay, here we go. As we have already seen numerous times, the symbolism in the book of Revelation often makes us use of imagery from the Old Testament. This part of the vision given to John will remind us of a very similar vision given to prophet Daniel. This will be a very helpful guide in our interpretation of the beast from the sea in verse 1 and following. Okay? So as we interpret this, we have the Bible to help us. Gee, thank you, God. Because we've seen these animals before. Okay? God has a regular zoo in the Old Testament, right? The beast has many characteristics of the 4 beasts of Daniel 7. Okay? John's beast has the mouth of a lion. Daniel's first beast is like a lion. John's beast has the feet like those of a bear. Daniel's second beast looked like a bear. John's beast was like a leopard. Daniel's third beast looked like a leopard. John's beast has 10 horns. Daniel's fourth beast has 10 horns. John's beast has 7 heads. Daniel's third beast has 4 heads. So together with the other beasts, we have 7 heads. John's beast was given power to wage war against the saints. One of the 10 horns of Daniel's beast is described as waging war against the saints. You see? This is not that hard. This is pretty easy stuff. The fact that John's beast has 10 horns and 7 heads also tells us there's a close connection and alliance between this beast and the great red dragon, or the devil. In Daniel, we are told that the 4 beasts he sees are 4 kingdoms or empires. And comparing the vision in chapter 7 with the vision in chapter 2 of Daniel, the 4 kingdoms become easy to name. The first kingdom is the Babylonian Empire. The second kingdom is the Persian Empire. The third is the Greek Empire. And the fourth is the Roman Empire. And when we went through Daniel, we did a Bible class on Daniel a few years back. I remember now how many, 6, 7 years back. We went through this very, very detailed. And I showed you very, very clearly from history how each of these beasts and how each of these things were those empires: Babylonian, Persian, Greek, and Roman. Okay? Very clear. And actually, very few Bible scholars argue that point. Most are pretty much agreed on that. In addition, the 4 heads of the Greek Empire are the 4 kingdoms into which the Greek Empire was divided after the death of Alexander the Great. Also, the 10 horns of the 4 beasts are the many kingdoms or nations that arose from the Roman Empire after its eventual demise. Oh boy, if you had been around way back in the day when the common market nations got to be 10 in number, oh my goodness, you would have think guys like Hal Lindsey and Jerry Falwell went absolutely apoplectic. It was like Jesus is on the doorstep and he's just sticking his head in saying, "You guys ready?" As soon as that happened, I forget which country was the 10th. Italy, maybe? Huh? Was it? No, it wasn't us. We're not in it. Never were. But
No, we weren't in it, but we are a direct inheritor.
Oh, yeah.
of the Roman system.
But- well, yeah. But when the common market itself got to be 10 countries, oh man, I'm telling you, the prognosticators and the religious kooks went absolutely nuts. Oh, wow. It's like they did in 48 when Israel became a political entity again. Oh, man. When these things happen, these people go absolutely crazy, and they lose all sense and rationality. They just become absolute nutcases. And it's really sad to see, but anyway. The conclusion is already absolutely clear and evident. The beast that John saw rising from the sea symbolizes all secular government. No other interpretation fits the details given to John, which compared to Daniel 2 and 7. Once again, we must always allow Scripture to interpret Scripture. Okay? At this point, it needs to be said that all secular governments are indeed established, instituted, and preserved by God for as long as, and only as long as, they serve His general overall purpose of bringing the gospel to the world. However, at the same time, their very power makes them effective tools of the devil, just as any other creation of God can become an instrument of the devil. Now, we're going to be focusing at one point on one of the heads or one of the pieces of this beast, and he becomes very, very important also. Going back to the first verse for a moment, we also note that the heads of this beast were names of blasphemy. We remember that in biblical usage, a name means a great deal more than just an arbitrary designation we may apply to a person or thing. It is often used to describe that thing or person and tells us exactly and precisely who and what he is. The term blasphemy means literally evil speaking or slander. The very name of this beast is a slander in and of itself. Later in the chapter, we discover that this slander is so change it to is, and directly to directed at none other than God himself. The fact of the matter is that many honors and privileges that secular government claims for itself and its population bestows on it are really blasphemies against God. This is true of all government in the sinful world. Yes, even what we call democracies and republics. They are not immune from taking glory that belongs only to God and applying it to themselves. Indeed, sometimes it is declared as patriotism, crosses the line into rank idol worship, which you just talked about. The deference and honors heaped upon certain political offices and national symbols like the flag. So this can become a beast. This can become a God-replacing idol. Of course, this is especially true of those governments that are openly anti-biblical or atheistic, such as Islamic or communist nations. But again, it applies to everybody, not just those. The dangerous and destructive power of secular government are clearly portrayed in the animals seen in this vision. Leopards, bears, and lions fill most people with great fear. Thus, from our human point of view, believers can become afraid when faced with the power of the government, before which we may feel helpless. We see that even governments seemingly benign to Christianity are often instruments of Satan. You know, when the government approves abortion, they're serving Satan. When the government approves Pride Month, they're serving Satan. When the government approves trans whatever, they're serving Satan. When the government approves of no-fault divorce, they're serving Satan, and so on, and so on, and so on. So even a republic, even a democracy, can serve Satan in those ways. When the government supports and props up sin, and very evident sin, very clear sin, some things the Bible is very, very clear about, when that happens, then that government is serving Satan. Even though that government is instituted by God, according to Romans 13. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a second here. Note, here again, we must remember the biblical teaching of divine concurrence. Here I'm taking you to dogmatics class for just a minute, all right? Don't let that bother you, okay? Got to dig into theology once in a while, folks, if we're going to understand Scripture in its full capacity, okay? Divine concurrence. This means that while God is totally in charge of all things, he also allows, that's a key word, Satan a considerable amount of leeway. Thus, it is possible for John to say that the beast receives his power and authority from Satan without contradicting the truth that all authority ultimately comes from God. So God has allowed Satan a certain amount of power and authority. He is the second most powerful entity in the universe. That's a lot of power. That's a lot of ability. Second most, but still that's a lot. And God allows that for God's own purpose. God's will is being accomplished always. Okay? Moving on. Okay? So now we got on to verse 3. Now we're getting into those heads. And again, I'm going to tell you that even though both of these beasts in various ways represent the civil government, the head in this beast's case is going to represent something else entirely. Not entirely, but something different. Verse 3 now brings another historical point of reference. A literal translation would be, one of the heads seemed to have been butchered to death, but its mortal wound was healed. That's a good translation. Butchered to death. Not just slain, not just had its head cut off or poked with a spear, but just mangled. Okay, just like there's no way this thing is going to come back. Here we see a specific event in history which was predicted here in John's vision and truly came to pass, to wit. I love to use that once in a while. It's a lot of fun to say, to wit. The terrible and deadly persecutions of believers at the hands of the Roman Empire came to an end under the newly converted Emperor Constantine when in AD 313 he ordered that Christianity be recognized as a legitimate and legal religion throughout the entire empire. So, the government, as a tool of Satan to harm the church, can be said to have suffered what looked like a fatal wound. You see that? And who would have thought if now Constantine's a Christian and he makes it legal, later on he's going to make it the official religion, are you ever going to come back from that, devil? Now, if anybody wants to be anything, you want to be a dog catcher, okay? You want to be a postman, you know, you want to be some bureaucrat wherever punching a stamp, you know, bum, 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 passport stamps, whatever. You got to be a Christian. Otherwise, you can't be anything. You can't do nothing, all right? That's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful. That's like going down and applying for a job at the hospital down here or at one of the schools, and their first question is, are you a Christian? Can we call up your pastor and see that you've been to church regularly? Imagine that. Imagine how many people will all of a sudden be filling the pews, huh? Right? All right, so the Roman government actually became a promoter. It went from persecutor to promoter like overnight. This was a real headbanger for a lot of people. Nobody saw this, by the way, nobody, but of course this, John is saying this 200 years before it happens. 200 years before it happens. Nobody else saw it coming. I can even say even the Christians didn't see it coming. When Constantine came out and said, okay, I'm a Christian now, everybody was like, what? Huh? That's crazy. Going even further in 325 AD, Christianity became the de facto original official religion of Rome. And I mean it. You could not be elected, worm catcher if you were not a Christian. You to get anywhere in the Roman Empire after 325, you had to be a Christian. This supposed fatal wound, however, turned out to be not so fatal after all. For in a few hundred years, the state church of Rome became one of the greatest enemies of the gospel and true biblical Christianity the world has ever seen. It remains so today. The state church of the old Roman Empire is the Roman church today. It can be said without fear of contradiction that the Roman church, the one people call Catholic, has most certainly hounded, persecuted, and murdered more gospel-loving believers since the Dark Ages than the Roman Empire did in its 200 plus years of persecution of ancient Christianity. I stand by that statement. I can prove that statement numerous times over. There is no contradiction in that whatsoever. All the people burned at the stake in the Inquisition, I mean, we're talking thousands, tens of thousands. The entire Cathari, 500,000 people wiped out by Roman armies, Roman church armies. Yes, sir.
Yeah, aren't we talking here in the sense of where the Christianity is being taught to the government, and yet today we look at the term called division of church and state, and when that came about, and was that a devilish action, or what was?
Oh, that was a good thing.
You think so?
Oh, I know so. It's a fact. You do not want church and state conjoined. No, you don't. And like I just said so right here. Look at this. So let me read it again. The Roman church, in conjunction with the Roman government and the government of the Holy Roman Empire for 1,000 years. Understand, the first Reich was what? The first Roman Empire. When was the first Roman Empire founded? Around 700, 750 BC.
After
Okay?
Caesar was assassinated.
No. It was founded before that. The founding of Rome, I'm talking about.
Oh,
The
Rome.
founding of Rome, 753, I believe, is the date. BC. 753. When did it fall? According to most historians, 476. That's 1,000 years. That's 1,000 years. Second Reich. We all know what the Third Reich is. What was the Second Reich? We forget. We always forget that old Second Reich.
The church.
Well, the holy, notice, Holy Roman Empire. Okay? From about 600, maybe 700 if you want to go that far, to about 1800, give or take. Again, 1,000 years. That was the second 1,000-year Reich. And then, of course, Hitler said he would be the Third Reich. It didn't work out that way. So-
What bothers me is the fact that when we did this division of church and state, to me, that's like when we took prayer out of the schools and things like this.
Prayer doesn't belong in schools.
You know why?
No, it doesn't belong in schools. Who are you going to pray into?
God,
Which God?
to me, there is only one God.
Well, I know to you.
Around the world.
I know to you, but okay. So you're a little kid. You're a little kid. You're 10 years old. They say it's your turn to give the prayer,
Okay,
and you're a Mormon.
yeah.
Which
And
God are you praying to?
And you're probably living in Utah or something.
Right.
like
Well,
that.
which God are you praying to? Are you praying to the one true triune God?
No,
No, you
you're
certainly are not.
No, you're not.
No, you're not. Is that true prayer then?
But I think
No.
get freedom of religion.
Well, freedom of religion means you can go to any church you want to go to, and you can believe anything you want to believe.
Yeah, wherever you live, each state.
An instrument of the
But
devil.
then come out and say, regardless of what.
Okay, Mississippi. Okay, Mississippi. The little kid's 10 years old, Mississippi. He gets to say the prayer. Okay, he doesn't believe in infant baptism. He doesn't believe in original sin. He doesn't believe in the real presence in the Lord's Supper. Is he? You and him together in prayer?
Again, we don't have that exist around here, in my opinion.
Well, I understand your point, Tony. I understand your point, and I know it bothers a lot of people. I understand that, but that has nothing to do with our problem. That has nothing to do with the problem. The moral problem in the country is not taking prayer out of schools. The moral problem in the country is not posting the 10 Commandments in schools. That's not where the problem comes from. The problem comes from liberal churches who are teaching that homosexuality is not a sin. The problem comes from liberal churches who are teaching that abortion is not a sin. The problem comes from liberal churches who deny the Trinity. The problem comes from liberal churches who deny the resurrection and the virgin birth. That's where the problem comes from. It doesn't come from the state either being Christian or not Christian.
And I think 200 years ago, these churches did not advocate these things, and a lot of these churches didn't even exist. And they only come about because we allowed it.
The people allowed it. You're right. You're right.
That's wrong.
The people allowed it. It was the people who allowed. The Unitarian Church existed at the time of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The Unitarians existed. The Congregationalists existed. The Congregationalists existed. Unitarians existed who did not believe in the Trinity. I have explained this over and over and over again to you guys. The people who founded this country, a few, very few, were biblical Christians. Most were not. Most were not. Thomas Jefferson's version of the Bible, he took out all the miracles. All of them. Thomas Jefferson did not believe that Jesus was the Son of God. Neither did Benjamin Franklin. Neither did Alexander Hamilton. Washington was a Trinitarian Christian. He was one. There are a few more I can't pull up right now. Go ahead. Yes, dear.
Things that don't necessarily be Christian. You're putting your trust in somebody else's faith and not everybody's faith.
I understand, folks, just like I understand Calvin's point when he looked out and saw the terrible things going on in Christianity and said sacraments don't work. I understand coming to that conclusion. It's a wrong conclusion, but I understand it. Okay? I sympathize with it. Okay? I sympathize with your point, Tony, that it looks bad when we don't allow the coach to pray with his football players. I know that bothers you. It bothers me too, in a sense. All right? But I am wise enough to know and know history well enough to know that that is not the problem. That's not where the problem comes from. The problem comes from elsewhere. The problem comes from progressiveness, liberalism in the church. That's where the problem comes from, not the government. It wouldn't matter one way or another, whatever the government did. And I just would soon not have evolutionists and atheist types who call themselves Christian be representing me. Okay?
About Islam.
Or Islam, that's right.
Islamic football
I mean, now they've got imams giving the prayer in Congress when the Congress starts its day. Okay, now they got Muslims doing that. I don't want to pay for that in my taxes. I don't think we should have an imam as a chaplain at the Senate. I think that's wrong. Okay? But freedom of religion means just that. You can do anything you want. And the United States of America, just by putting under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, doesn't make anybody a Trinitarian, Jesus-believing Christian. And putting in God we trust on our money doesn't make anybody a biblical Christian. It's nonsense. It's foolishness to think otherwise. And prayer in schools and, all that other stuff is all the same thing. That is not the problem. Okay. Where was I? Number 10. With this beast who rises out of the sea, we see how Satan tries to mimic the triune God. The first he brings out of the sea mimics the Son, for the dragon Satan, mimicking the Father, gives this beast his power and throne, just as the Father gives the Son his power and throne. You see that? You see the Father says, I give all things to my Son, okay? The devil says, I give all things to this beast. Okay? Same thing. We also can see this beast mimicking the Son in that it is object of worship and suffers a fatal wound, crucifixion, but lives, resurrection, just as Christ is object of worship and suffers a fatal wound, but lives. You see how the devil, and this is what the devil likes. He likes to look like Christian. He likes to look biblical, but he's really not. He's imitating. He's fooling. And he's drawing a lot of people into his foolishness. A lot of people are falling for this. That's the whole problem with Christian nationalism. Okay? We talked about this when we talked a little bit about Trump and some of the things that he says and quotes the Bible and whatever. Doesn't know the Bible from a hole in the ground. Has no idea what he's talking about. Okay? The man's been to church maybe 3 times in his whole life. Okay? He's about as biblical Christian as my poodle. But he likes to throw that terminology around. He likes to do that. And, maybe he's sincere about it. I don't know. I have no idea whether he's sincere or not. But I wish somebody, would take this guy aside and teach him some actual theology. Number 11, the first beast bears blasphemous names, another parody of the Son, who bears the divine name. This refers to the Roman emperors and later the Roman pontiff, claiming to be God and thus bearing the divine name. But because he is not God, nor one of the God's saints, he blasphemes by claiming the divine name upon himself. This beast is satanic, folks, taking a worldly form in the attempt to imitate the incarnation of the Son. Just as the Lamb is seated on the throne of God and shares God's authority, so this beast shares Satan's throne and authority. The description of the beast as a leopard, bear, and lion, as we noted, comes from Daniel 7. There, Daniel depicts 4 beasts, referring to each successful evil empire. Here, they're condensed into one. This also includes an indication of Rome, first as an empire, then as a false church, being the 4th beast. Okay, so the 4th beast is the little of both. It's the Roman Empire, but it's also the Roman Church. Now, since that's true of one beast, we also have that true of this second beast from the sea. It is the civil government, like the first beast, a little more detail, but it gives birth to or has an ally in another entity, we'll just call it that right now, okay, which is, again, the Roman Church. Moving on. Naturally, the unbelieving world worships this beast because of its great pomp and power. He seems invincible. Yet we remember that the Lamb is worshipped because the Father has given him his authority, and no one is like the Lamb or can make war with him. He is the one who is able to make war with the beast and conquer him. In fact, he already has through his death and resurrection. Verse 5 tells us that this beast blasphemes against God. The beast claims that the dragon is the true God, which is great blasphemy, also against the saints, showing Satan's contempt for both God and God's people. Once again, this goes on throughout the entire New Testament period of time, or 42 months. But the beast's blasphemous activity and evil assault on the Lamb's church will be intensified as the last day draws near, for he will be allowed to make war upon all the saints and even seem to conquer them. That's coming up in a few minutes. Things will be bad during this time, for nearly every person will worship this first beast, everyone whose name has not been written in the book of life. There will be no middle ground. Either an individual is with the Lamb or with the beast. All unbelievers, by their denial of the Lamb, worship the first beast and belong to Satan. Believers, on the other hand, can be assured of their salvation, for their names have been written in the Lamb's book of life since before the foundation of the world. Thus, even during Satan's unrestrained raging during the last day, believers can be comforted to know that their salvation is secure through faith in the Lamb. Once again, there's real theme of the book of Revelation, not fear and dread, but comfort and final victory. The emphasis here is on the endurance of the saints, who, though persecuted and killed, are conquerors through Christ. It's also a warning to believers not to be led into the world's ways of fighting and conquering through warfare. We're going to stop there. I want to spend some time on that next note. We're getting short. So we'll pick it up at verse 7. So again, folks, we've got these two beasts, which are two aspects of the problem that we have with the powers of this world. Okay, and we will see this this cahoots, if you will, this working together between church and state that is very, very bad for biblical Christians, right? And turns out to be really deadly for biblical Christians. Okay, so that's coming up. We're going to see that, and we're going to finally end with, we're going to talk about the guy with the name 666. Woo! All right, all that good kind of stuff that's coming up in this chapter, and we'll identify this guy and be able to say who he is and everything without any problem whatsoever. Questions, comments? So again, sounds weird, sounds wacky, sounds fantastical, mysterious and all that. It's really not. Okay, it's really not. It's really pretty simple if you know history. If you know biblical history and church history, if you know that, you can make this stuff fit in very nicely and very simply and very easily. And you don't have to go off on these wacky things. This means the Cossacks and the Russian army, and this means Nazi tanks, and this means ICBMs, and all kinds of wacky stuff like that. You just don't have to do that. Although that sells books. It makes people very rich. It does. My interpretation ain't gonna make me rich. I can tell you that right now. Okay? It's not popular.
But it's a result of what was prophesied.
Right, and it's a result of making having the scriptures be consistent and interpret itself.
Right.
All right, let's close. May the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with us all. Amen.